Adams is from Cleveland, Ohio. He's the president of the AIM Institute, which was founded in 2005. Dan is speaking on the voice of the customer, how to combine human skills in technology to boost new product success. He has more than 40 years of experience in market-facing innovation. His passion is training your people in highly effective ways to understand your customer needs, those underlying unmet needs. Most of his work is with large multinational corporations headquartered all around the world. In his spare time, Dan does a good deal of trail running, kayaking, and backpacking. Dan, take it away.
Great,
and
thanks.
We look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Jim. And let's see if we could get this showing here. Sorry, I thought I had it all lined up, and sorry about this. Need to get out the actual PowerPoint here. 1 second. There we go. It's hiding. You can see it okay, Jim?
It looks good.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so let's start with a question. What would it mean to your company if the organic growth you had at your company was really strong, reliable year after year, profitable? I mean, just think about that a little bit. You know, the value of your company would go up. Activist investors would be active somewhere else. Your people at your company, your employees would have stable, rewarding careers. And so what's the single thing that most companies can do to get that kind of growth? It's actually really understanding the needs of their customers better. Now, I'll share some research we did in a little bit that supports that, and we'll get into some very practical tips that you can start using tomorrow on how to understand customer needs. So if you remember Marty's talk this morning, he said we need to understand and meet customer needs better than our competition. So we're going to talk about the understand part. But as Jim mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to just be external customers. These can be internal customers, or think of it as the voice of your colleagues, if you will. Jackie talked about talent management. Tomorrow, Reed's going to talk about change management. And so these methods can be used for all these. Now, I'm going to focus a little bit on new product success with external customers because it's very tangible and easy to follow. But again, you can apply it in a lot of different ways. So let's take a look at this. First of all, what does best-in-class voice of customer look like? We've learned a long time ago you don't want to start wrapping software and technology or AI around some process until you get that process optimized. Then we'll take a look at the human skills that are needed and the technologies that can boost success. So when we get to those technologies, we'll talk about these three, and I'll cover those a little bit later on, ending up with AI. So first of all, what does best-in-class VOC look like? Well, let's start by understanding what is hurting us when it comes to understanding customer needs. Jim, did I lose the screen there for a minute? Or can you still see it?
We can still see it.
Okay, very good. All right, excellent. So hang on 1 second here, and we're going to go ahead and make sure we've got it back. Okay, so what are some leading causes of new product failures? So way back 5 decades ago, it was inadequate market analysis. And then 5 decades later, no market need was the main problem we have. So we have 5 decades saying it's really a matter of not so much technical risk, can we really do this, as it is a matter of commercial risk. What is it the customers really want? So how would you lower commercial risk? Well, there's a number of things you could do. If you wanted to have a lot of commercial risk, you could guess at what customers want. And that may sound kind of silly, but believe it or not, a lot of companies are doing this today. If you want to have less risk, ask your sales rep what they think the customers want. Or maybe go talk to one job function at one customer. Lower the risk some more by talking to many job functions and customers, or even going down the value chain. Maybe interview the whole ecosystem with co-suppliers and others. Now, we're going to talk about this later. If you let the customers lead the interview, that will lower risk. If you use advanced interview probing, some things we'll call trigger methods, and even observation, all those things will lower the risk even more. But the one thing that lowers it more than anything else are these quantitative interviews. It's a very good chance you're not doing this today. This is all about prioritizing the customer's needs. And I'll share with you some research on why that's so important. Okay, so the methodology that we've been training people in for 18 years now, we call it new product blueprinting. And it works like this. You go out to your customers and do qualitative interviews to understand their outcomes, their desired end results. They're often problems they want to see go away. So imagine you made ingredients for paint. You might go be talking to paint producers and hearing outcomes like better paint hiding power, better scrub resistance, better crayon removal, and so forth. And then what you'll do after a handful of those qualitative interviews are the preference interviews. Here, you'll ask them how important and satisfied they are on a scale of 1 to 10. So maybe hiding power is really important, and maybe they're not satisfied with it today. So what are we doing? We're diverging to all their outcomes, and then we're converging on the ones that really matter. And so the purpose of this is to stop errors of omission in the qualitative phase. Now, an error of omission is failing to uncover a customer's unarticulated need. No team gets faulted for it at the time because nobody knows they missed this. Then we want to stop errors of commission, which is picking the wrong darn outcome to work on in our solution, be it a new physical product, a new service, a new business model, whatever that solution is. Now, what we want to do once we have that process in place is bring the best human skills and the best technologies to bear. So what are the human skills? Well, we were wondering the same thing. So we did some research last year, and we got responses from over 300 people on 12 voice of customer skills. We wanted to find out how important and how satisfied they were with each of these. Essentially, we did a preference survey with these people. Now, here's what we learned. Some of the people were very honest. They told us they were on the left side. They said their understanding of market needs was very poor or poor. But notice the large chunks of red in those columns. They also, when asked, answered the question, how successful are you personally in new product development? They said, boy, less than half the time. So you don't want these people on your new product development team, okay? Now, on the right side, we had people who said, you know what, I'm pretty good, or even have a high understanding of market needs. Now, those people said, to 70% of them said, when I'm working on new product development, more often than not, we are successful. And so think about it this way. You've got 100 market-facing employees in your business, and you want to have 5 of them that are successful more often than not with new product development, or 70. So if the answer is 70, well, we need to really get them to the point where they truly understand market needs. Now, the research goes on. I'll show you how you can get a copy of this if you want, talking about some of the practical steps to get there. But here is the research. If you want to jot that down, b2bvocskills.com. And it's very thorough. I don't think there's any other research out there that explores this so carefully. It is focused on B2B. So if your company sells to other businesses, this is spot on. It can also be used in many consumer goods products where the customers have high knowledge, interest, and objectivity. So let's take a look at some of this human skills now. How do we get really good at this? Well, imagine it's before the days of Uber. You work for a taxi service, and you want to understand how to improve that service. Maybe the customer says, one of my problems is there's no seatbelt in the taxi. How would you probe on that? Well, we recommend what and why questions. This is a methodology we developed. So you might say, well, can you describe this for me? Well, you know, the seatbelt's there, but it's stuck. Well, how often does this happen? And where do you see this happen? So when I say it's a what question, I don't mean you're starting with the word what every time. I mean, you're trying to understand what they're telling you. What would it look like, feel like, smell like if you were there? Then you move into the why questions. Well, how does this impact you? Any other issues with this? So you're really starting with observation questions, and then you're moving to implication questions. And that's a good way of learning anything. Observation, implication, application. So especially focus on observation and implication. Then we recommend you add a clarifying statement. So here is a sheet we train people on. In fact, we've got this available if you want to download. That's one of the documents. You're feel free to use this. Put this next to your screen when you're on a Zoom or Teams call, or have it in your folder if you're meeting with a customer across the desk. So you start with some what questions. Could you describe that problem for me a little bit, ma'am? Where does it take place? When does it take place? How often do you see this? Once you get a good grasp of the why questions, you move on to the what questions, you move on to the why. Well, how does this impact you? Who does this impact? If you don't think you've got everything out of them, anything else I should know about this problem? Then you move into the clarify. Are you saying you want to minimize the time to calibrate this equipment? Are you saying you want to minimize the training time, maximize the retention? It could be anything. If you start with a verb, it's really powerful. In fact, we recommend minimize or maximize. When you're done with that problem, you simply say any other problems. Now, who's leading the interview? It's actually the customer, because you don't know what they're going to say when you say any other problems. So this methodology is not like traditional voice of customer, where you go in with your 20 questions. Instead, you listen for problems and let the customer lead the interview or the discussion. You say anything else, and off you go.
So Dan,
okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, just wanted to cut in here, just a question that, when you're doing these all these interviews, who are the people conducting it? What does that look like?
Great question. So think about two scenarios. The one is for new product development. Here, you probably want to have an interview team of a moderator and a note taker. As you'll see in a little bit, we're going to recommend you display your notes, so as you're typing, they can see it. Very engaging for the customers. So who would those people be? Very typically, it's somebody in the technical side and somebody in the commercial side. So if you've got a chemist, an engineer, a software developer, that takes care of technical. And then on the commercial side, marketing, product management, sales, business development. So that's for new product development, Jim. But we're also teaching these methods to salespeople. And so there will be a salesperson sitting across from the customer and just having a normal conversation. In this case, they're not displaying any notes. They're just taking notes. And when they hear a problem, they say, could you tell me more about that? Could you describe that? How often do you see that problem? Where do you, and boom, they're into that mode. Great question. Thanks, Jim. Keep them coming. So let's take a look now at some of these technologies. So first of all, statistical needs prioritization. So you remember I mentioned this earlier, that you would ask in preference interviews for 1 to 10 ratings on importance and satisfaction. Now we're going to tell them what a 5, 7, 10, and so forth mean on these, but you're hoping to get some of these outcomes that score high in importance and low in current satisfaction. Why? Well, the only thing the market might pay you a premium for is some problem or outcome that's important to them that's not good enough that you can fix. So that's what we're going for on this. So in terms of technology, we think it's helpful to display this and ask customers. Let's imagine you made corrugated packaging, okay? You're interviewing Amazon. You would say to them, well, how important is it to you to minimize the likelihood of box damage from moisture? And maybe they'll say, oh, it's between very important and critical. So you give them a score. Then you ask them, well, how satisfied are you today with your ability to minimize the likelihood of box damage from moisture? And they say, oh, that's barely acceptable. Then you would go through this with maybe 10 or 15 of these outcomes. Now, where did those outcomes come from? Well, you remember you did the qualitative discovery interview earlier? What other problems, Mr. Customer? That means if you do 6 to 10 of those discovery interviews, you will have dozens and dozens of outcomes. Could be 50, 75, 100. You're going to look for duplicates, which ones came up the most often with the most enthusiasm. You'll winnow that list down, and now you'll take 10 to 15 of those back into your quantitative preference interviews, because this is the needs prioritization part of the process. Now, when you do that, we recommend building something we developed actually 20 years ago called a market satisfaction gap chart. It's a very simple chart. Every one of these outcomes, like scrub resistance, crayon removal, hiding power, it's going to have a score. Now, what we do is we take the market average importance score on a 1 to 10 scale times 10 minus the average satisfaction score. So if the market gave you an average importance of 9 and an average importance of a satisfaction of 6, you'd have 9 times 10 minus 6, 36%. Now, we've done this with well over 1,000 client teams all around the world in every imaginable industry. And what we've learned is this: if you get a market satisfaction gap on an outcome that's over 30%, that's your indication that the market is eager to have you work on this. So now what do? We stop working on stuff the market isn't eager for us to work on, and we only work on stuff that the market is eager for us to work on. This is how we eliminate most commercial risk in the front end of innovation. More and more companies are doing this. The vast majority are still not. This gives you a tremendous competitive advantage if you're doing this and your competitors are not, because you can be sure they are squandering R&D resources trying to come up with cures for known diseases. Okay, now how do we know this is important? Well, we did some research and we asked people to self-assess their voice of customer skills on all 12 of these. And you can see a 5 is barely acceptable, a 7 is good, and so forth. Now, over on the right, we also have these 3 bars for each one of these. And as the legend shows you, the top faded bar, those were people who also, when asked, said, yeah, when I'm doing new product development, we're not very successful. We're rarely successful. The bottom bold bar, those are the people who say, yep, when I'm doing new product development, we are usually successful. So we wanted to know which of these was the strongest differentiator between new product development failure and success. Turns out that prioritizing customer needs was the biggest differentiator. So if you really want to drive new product development success, you need to prioritize these. We recommend something like the preference interviews followed by the market satisfaction gap. Why is this so important? Well, it's unbiased, it's unfiltered. We have confirmation bias. People say, oh, I think the customer wants this, I hope they want this. We hear what we want the customers to be saying. The customers often tell us what they think we want to hear. So you need to use the language of math, where it's unbiased and unfiltered, direct from the customer. So that's what we're looking for. Now, what's another technology we can bring? Well, if you ask me which is better, an in-person voice of customer interview or a virtual VOC interview, and you tell me they're the same length, I'm going to have to go with the in-person, because you can build relationships, you can watch for body language, you can take customer tours. But here's the thing. If that 2-hour interview took you 10 hours of travel, you and your colleague, maybe a better question is, when does each of these make sense? And so there are some hidden advantages of virtual VOC that frankly most people aren't aware of. Obviously, they know about the lower cost, no airfare, no hotels, but the other cost is time. Probably 70, 80% of your time on a business trip is non-productive. If you have customers where their R&D is in Chicago, their operations is in Houston, their marketing is in London. You're going to need to do a virtual session anyway, Teams, Zoom, something like that, to get them all on the call. You can take and have your viewable tips right next to you to help you in a virtual session. Wonderful training for colleagues. They can sit in on some of these without any airfare, any cost. Now they're ready to go and it's their turn to lead the interviews. When you come in your office and maybe you have a VOC war room and you want to do this virtually, make sure you have a big whiteboard. You can actually have an observer making notes saying to the moderator, ask them this question on sticky note number 13. You can get assistance for the note taker. This is a weird one, but if that is a picture of your customers and you're back at the home office doing this virtually, what are they looking at? They're looking at your note taker's notes and they're naturally slowing their pace. Sometimes in an in-person interview, they forget the poor note taker. They lock onto the moderator, especially if they're very engaging, and the poor note taker is 3 notes behind. You can debrief rapidly, turning off one web conference, turning on a private one. Scheduling is so much easier for an hour and a half than a day and a half of travel. If you have a cancellation, instead of limping back through 3 or 4 airports, you can simply reschedule this thing and your project will go so much faster. You know, we need more project speed. If you told me you were going to launch a new product and it was eventually going to have $5 million of revenue annually, and it had typical gross margins, here's my question. What would be the value of launching that 1 month earlier? The actual answer is about $80,000 in net present value. That's $4,000 per business day. So we need more innovation urgency. And by doing virtual, you can absolutely go faster. So a question though is, well, you know, how do we do this? How do we really engage customers? And so we strongly recommend you come up with some method to make this visual. You'll find that the customers can see you recording their responses. They will absolutely engage you much more. It's critical to holding their interest for a long period of time. The other thing is, when do you do the in-person? When do you do the virtual? There's a lot of factors here. You probably want to blend both of these, but you might lean toward the in-person if it's still new and you don't want to add the technology. Later, you could add the virtual technology on. If you already have strong, friendly relationships, it's easier to do the virtual. If you need a tour, you better go do the in-person. If you can do both quantitative and qualitative in either in-person or virtual, but I'm not sure why I'd get on a plane to do the quantitative. It's just so easy to do virtually. If it's difficult to coordinate schedules, go virtual. If your travel costs are high, go virtual. If you've already completed a lot of interviews and you're just building statistical confidence, go virtual. So there's a lot more here that we don't have time to cover. If you want to get out your pen and jot this down, virtualvoc.com. You can download this and get all these tips, and also those advantages are explained in a little bit more detail. So now this brings us up to the last part we want to talk about, AI-based voice of customer training. Let's take a look at this. And by the way, Jim, I know you had some questions as we're going. Did you have anything else before I hit the last part here?
I think you're good.
Okay.
A couple of them I'll hold off to the end.
All right, sounds good then.
Thank you.
So let's think a little bit about the human strengths and the AI strengths. So one of the things that humans are really good at is engaging customers. So with humans, you can get them to the point where customers want to tell you things. So think about it in your case. You know, you go to work and the boss doesn't listen to you. You go home and the kids they don't listen to you. And all of a sudden, here comes a supplier, a professional business person, and they're saying, "Tell me more. This is fascinating." You know, you just want to give them more information in that human-to-human interaction. The other thing that humans are really good at is on a real-time basis asking the right questions. So we, as you know, don't recommend you go in with 20 questions and fill in the blank because you just bore people with that. I mean, think about your situation. When you have somebody come to your front door, they knock on, they say, hello, I'm doing a survey. How much time do you have for survey guy? Probably not much. Now, what a survey guy would have come to you while you were at work. You see, at work, you're trying to kill time, looking for things to do, right? Yeah, you're even busier at work. So you don't want to see a supplier coming and have 20 questions. But you do want to have people who are interested in you. And they show that interest when you tell them something, they respond with a relevant probing question, not just something that's kind of artificial. So far, humans are really good at that. Now, what's AI good at? Well, it's really good at providing context. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that's already known about the customer's job to be done. It can collect that much, much better than any human could ever do. The other thing it's good at is training humans. Let's see if we can get some help from AI to get better and better at these human interactions. So let's see what that could mean in a practical example. So as you probably guessed, we train B2B companies, we train them with our software that's got these sticky notes in there, and we practice and do role playing with them before they go and they have live ammunition with real customers, okay? But what we're just starting to do, and this is just weeks old, this is very new for us. We have a new feature in it where artificial settings will come up. Here's an example I just ran before our meeting here. Let's say we want to paint contractors in North America have the job of painting interior of homes with semi-gloss paint. And we found that asking for about 18 problems is actually a pretty nice number to do. So then I hit the button that says load AI suggestions. I wait about 15 seconds, and these are the problems that ChatGPT has now generated. Oh, there's uneven application, visible brush or roller marks, poor adhesion, drying too quickly, difficulty in achieving uniform sheen. If I keep moving down, scrolling down, incompatibility with certain primers, difficulty in touch-up work, and so forth. So those are the 18 problems that ChatGPT has seen with the prompts that I provided it here in the software.
So
let's
Dan,
just,
yeah,
please.
On those, because everybody's wondering about AI and how to use it, and it's self-generating. So it's generating, it's generative. So it's taking everything in that big database you mentioned before, and then it's generating new ideas. I know it's early stages or new problems or challenges, right? Issues. Mm-hmm. And so, how realistic are these? Is it going to be like 50% or 70% realistic? And then, which ones are real and which ones aren't when you're doing this? How do you manage that in the session?
Yeah, so to your point, it is new. We use this with teams before they go out generally and do their real interviews. But since we just introduced it, we've been getting some feedback from teams, and the answer is very, very, very representative of the market. I was coaching a team in Italy over in Milan, and they're working in the coatings area. And they had already done 3 real discovery interviews with us. I said, hey guys, we have a new feature. Let me show it to you. This is last Friday. And they looked at this thing and it was kind of jaw dropping, Jim. They go, oh my goodness, that's the kind of stuff we're hearing from real customers. So we're still in the learning phase on this, but we think in addition to a training and a familiarization of the terminology, we actually think this may help teams do fewer real customer interviews. Now, a valid question is, well, do you have to do any real customer interviews at all? Well, as we know, ChatGPT scrapes the internet. It's been a little while since it scraped it, but it doesn't get to the real deep issues. We don't understand why these are issues. We don't understand the value that we can generate when we solve these issues. So we don't see the human interaction going away, but we think it could be maybe instead of doing 8 interviews, we can do 4 interviews. I don't know. Still to be
Yeah.
learned on that.
The other thing to consider is when you do these type of interviews, the customer now owns the solution that's generated, and you miss out on that opportunity when you don't have these conversations.
Well, that's an excellent point. Very good point, Jim. You know, if somebody is listening and they are doing B2C, or you're B2B and you have tens of thousands of customers, you make nail guns and there are tens of thousands of contractors. What I'm going to say now is not that relevant. But if you are a B2B supplier and you have some customers who are important to you, maybe it's a more concentrated industry, and there are some customers that you not only want to get insight from, but you also want to engage them so they want to work with you, and it could influence your sales later. Then you make a really good point, Jim. When you do these with humans, they are now engaged in the process. So if you stay with them and continue to tell them your progress, when you're ready to sell your new product, they're going to be primed to buy it. That won't happen if you just go out and have somebody else or AI do the whole thing. So let me
Great.
just summarize this, and we'll get into any other questions people have. So today we see AI especially useful if you're going into an unfamiliar market. You can get familiar with the industry terminology. It's wonderful practice for building skills. Teams and Zoom now have captions, and they can translate. So you can even use this because AI is behind those translations. You can even use this to do international interviewing quite effectively. Now, what do we see coming next? We believe we can consolidate a lot of secondary market research. You want to do secondary market research, which is what others have learned, before you do primary research, which is the actual interviewing, because you want to make sure you're pursuing an attractive market segment. You don't want to do beautiful product development in an ugly market segment. We think AI can help with that. We also find it's very valuable to map out the customer's process every step of the way and say, help me understand, Mr. Customer, how I could help you do step 1 faster, better, cheaper, step 2, step 3. We think that AI could be very helpful in creating those known job maps and then have some customer refinement when we're on the interview. We talked about those outcome statements. Are you saying you want to minimize the time it takes to yada, yada, yada? Actually, we're doing some experimenting, and AI is pretty good at doing some of those outcome statements. And then finally, it may come to the point where AI will be able to give us some suggestions for probing during the interviews. We're less confident about that, but that's something we want to be aware of. So we'll keep tuned on that. So that's basically where we're at in this thing. As Jim, you mentioned earlier, it can be used internally. You could use it for training topics, the needs of your downstream manufacturing within your company, digital transformation, improving your supply chain, driving cultural change. Anything, any situation where you know somebody who has a task to accomplish or a job to be done, and you want to help them do it better by understanding all of their desired outcomes and then prioritizing the ones that are most important and least satisfied so you can develop the optimum solution for that. And so I think, Jim, with that, I will turn off my presentation here and we'll see if we have any questions. And I think we've figured this out. Jim, remind me if this is how we're doing it. I'm going to take the easy questions. You're going to take the hard ones. Isn't that what we agreed to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way. So one question I've seen here, and that is this job to be done. It's a fairly well established in the new product space, but a lot of folks may not be familiar with job to be done.
Yeah. So Clayton Christensen coined the phrase, a late professor at Harvard, and he said that people don't really want your product. He said what they really want to do is they want to accomplish a job, and they want to hire your product or service to accomplish that. And so what we find when you think about new product development, think of 3 phases. Front end, what does the market want? Development stage, we go into the lab, push back to frontiers of modern science. Third phase, we launch it. What we found is that front end stage, the most successful teams will completely immerse themselves in the customer's job to be done, understand divergently all the outcomes, and converge on the important ones. And they do not talk about their products, solutions, hypotheses in the front end. It's all about the customer's job to be done. So that's how it's used in new product development.
That might follow up well with this question around min and max. Your min-max statements, which you mentioned a couple times, it's a very unique approach. I think maybe share a little bit more about that and how that works.
Sure, and I got to give a little credit here to Tony Olick of Strategy, and he's the one who kind of came up with this methodology that we've adopted in our practice. So, you know, when you hear the customer's needs, oftentimes they're fuzzy. Oh, I want a more durable package for corrugated packaging. Well, that's not measurable. How do you measure durable? So what we need to do is probe. When you say durable, what do you mean? Fewer punctures, less abrasion, more water, less water, damage. And so you need to probe on that. And if we can get it down to an outcome statement. So are you saying you want to minimize the frequency of water damage to boxes? Now that's measurable. And it helps you as a supplier, but it also helps the customer clarify their thinking. So in these interviews, you're kind of training them after 2 or 3 of these, they'll actually start putting their outcomes in that more formal fashion. It's very effective.
So I have to ask the pending question, since we're talking about AI. Can AI help build those statements off of a conversation?
Well, we've started experimenting with that, not in a real-time basis, but it's kind of scary. So you have a sticky note, right, with all this probing in there, and we started experimenting with AI, and it looks pretty promising. So we're not there yet, but that's we think that could be the next thing, is to have AI at least suggest. Now, when we suggest these to customers, we always say, is this what you're saying? Because only the customer knows what the real outcome statement is.
And that's the right way to treat AI as a primer, not the answer.
Exactly.
That's the key underlying. So you also mentioned B2B and B2C. Can you explain a little bit more from a VOC perspective on this methodology from applications from a B2B versus B2C?
This is a really, really important principle that many companies aren't really taking advantage of. Imagine our company, Jim, makes hose, okay? Now, on one hand, we sell hose to homeowners for garden hose. On the other hand, we sell hydraulic hose to Caterpillar. And imagine we're having 2 interviews, okay? We interview VOC homeowner, but we're also interviewing a mechanical engineer at Caterpillar about her hydraulic hose. We know those would be different. What would be different? The knowledge level. That engineer has years of education and training. Objectivity. That engineer has to make a group decision, has to be rational, is being held accountable. Interest level. We could make that engineer a hero at Caterpillar. How interested are end consumers? Well, here's a clue. You have to pay them to come to the focus group. So my point is, we have all these wonderful advantages in B2B, but in order to take advantage of advantage, you have to take advantage of it. I mean, most companies aren't doing that. So the methodology I just described here today has been optimized for B2B. It's assuming you have customers who are knowledgeable, objective, interested, rational, and so forth. And so it's really important to kind of know what market you're going after and take advantage of it.
Thanks, Dan. Very informative. You mentioned that the customer leads the interview. What does this mean? How does that work?
So the thing that people really wrestle with when they're first exposed to our training is they come to the workshop. We do workshops and we do coaching afterwards. And they come to the workshop and they go, great. So you're gonna teach me how to ask a brilliant list of questions, right? You say, no, we're not gonna do that. Sorry. What we are gonna do is help you to brilliantly probe whatever it is the customer wants to talk about. And so when you go in that interview, you will start with 2 or 3 questions. We call them current state. and it's something that you know the customer can answer really, really easily. They're the master, you're the student, okay? So we do that as a warm-up. There's like icebreakers. But after that, the only question you're starting with is, tell me what other problems you have. And they tell you, well, we're having too many punctures on the box. Probe, probe, probe on your sticky note. When's it happen? Where's it happen? Please describe it. What's puncturing it? How does it impact you? Is there anything else I should know? Oh, so you want to minimize the number of boxes that get punctured? And then here's the key. You then say, what other problems are you having? Now, when you ask that question, you have absolutely no idea what the customer is going to say next. So psychologically, it's all subconscious. The customer realizes, huh, I'm in charge of this thing. You're almost like a brainstorm facilitator, and they're giving you all of the problems. This is why these interviews, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes they've gone for 4 or 5 hours, and the customer asked if the supplier could finish it the next day. I mean, that's kind of rare, but you see what I'm saying? You engage the customers, and here's the best part. When you go in with your 20 questions, you don't know what you're going to find, but the customer will lead you to the good stuff. If I can give one more explanation of that, because it's such an important point, Jim. Most teams, when they get started, they have some facts. They know what they know. They may have some assumptions. They know what they think. They may even have some questions. They know what they don't know. But I tell them, forget your questionnaire. You know what you know what you think, and you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. And you only get that by letting the customer lead the interview.
Yeah, and just I think building on that, what I think sales people want to be efficient, right? You want to get in and out. And you're opening up the box, so to speak, and allowing them to talk about anything. And from my experience when using this, sometimes management is worried about those type of issues coming out, and therefore are not so open to this, especially when you get to heavier industries, engineering to order type of environments.
Yeah.
And so, but it actually works brilliantly in that more than they can even imagine. So how do you convince, now that we have all these great tools, now I'm going to go up and I'm going to convince my management how to sell this to my management? What do I need to say?
Yeah, so the good news is we have some research, and it's very, very solid. One of those research documents, I've left in the documents, and people can download. The white paper is called Guessing at Customer Needs. The other one that they could go out to our website and download, because it's kind of a big one, it's www.b2bvocskills.com. And it's remarkable, the evidence showing how this really makes an impact. But when it really comes down to it, what happens in real life is they do a pilot project. They say, we work with a lot of multi-billion-dollar companies. Like 70% of our work is with Fortune 500. But when the pandemic came around, we came up with a new model that was virtual, so we can work with any size company now. And typically what we do is they field one team of 4 or 5 people, multifunctional. They're going to go into a market. They want to develop a new product. They come to our training. They get a little coaching. And then when they see the results, that's usually what it takes to win them over.
Fantastic, Dan. So let me just see if there's one more question here. Well, I think it's related to this, is who should spearhead the VOC?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Many of our clients, it's whoever is involved in R&D, new product development. They may own the stage gate process, chief technology officer, head of R&D, very, very common. At other companies, they will have a marketing function that doesn't just do promotion, but it's also about customer insight. And so sometimes they get involved with it. When we actually get to the training, we believe strongly you need to bring all those functions together. Technology, product management or marketing, and then often bring some salespeople in too, so they can help set up the interviews.
And so how long is the training typically for a company to get going?
So we kick it off with a 2 4-hour workshop, and then we assign a coach. And typically a project the very first time through will take 4 to 6 months. A coach will work with, the team as they're doing this. They'll do the discovery interviews, they'll do the preference interviews, they'll get the market satisfaction gap, and we show them how to put together a business case. Typically, it's used in their stage gate process to go into development, but typically 4 to 6 to get started. You can go faster, but they're learning at the same time that they're doing. It takes a little longer for that reason.
Yeah, because you got to get the customers. You got to set up those interviews, right?
You do have to set them up. But here's the thing, Jim. You and I did this years ago at a Fortune 500 company, right? And you were leading the charge. But that was before virtual VOC. It took a lot longer then. Now we're finding with the heavy dose of virtual VOC, it goes much, much faster than it used to.
That's great. Well, thank you, Dan, for a fantastic presentation and insights into VOC, making VOC easy and fun, right?
Right. Exactly.
Right. We'll see you at the top of the hour in the panel discussion. Looking forward to that discussion.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks everybody for joining us.
So again, at the top of the hour, please join us. We'll be having the panel discussion on the human part of AI into the workplace. Joining in that discussion will, of course, be Dan Adams, Jackie Gurney, Marty Jackness, and from Agile Extended, because we can't leave culture out too long. We've been talking quite a bit without directly talking about culture. We have Reed Reset from Agile Extended. So please do join us at the top of the hour. We look forward to seeing you there. Bye-bye.